Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the K9 episode Dream Eater, written by Jim Noble, his first script for the series, and is directed by Daniel McEdam, who has directed two of the better episodes of the series so far, The Sirens of Ceres and The Fall of the House of Griffith. So this story has like the strongest director in the series, so hopefully this one is a good one. Now this story tackles the concept of dreams, and in most, if not all, fantasy and franchise storytelling, dreams is always a go-to type of storytelling because dreams are interesting. They're also allow for some brilliant and some gorgeous directing usually, and they also are great examples of you could do like two types of storytelling when you do dreams. You could just go completely surreal and just do some really wacky and crazy stuff for the camera, or you can make it a much more deeper, much more personal character trait, and you can have characters and imagery which is to symbolize aspects of our character or even the moral of the story. And that's why I think dream fiction is some of the, in certain franchises, some of the best episodes or best stories in certain franchises. And for me, this is the start of a trilogy of dream stories, as this story is a dream story, and the next two stories we'll be tackling on the marathon are also, funny enough, dream stories. So, does this story hold up to the concept of dreams, and does it take advantage of the concept of dreams for the series? Well, you guessed that, because the story starts off seemingly pretty interesting. We have Starkey, he's being chased by a Jinx in this very surreal environment. When I say it's surreal, it's like an outside forest at night with a bit of orange and purple and green lights everywhere, which makes it a visually striking image, and it was a very promising start to the series, as one of my main criticisms for the franchise is that a majority of episodes has a samey feel to them. And here, at the start of this episode, we were getting some really promising stuff. And we have some really great moments in which we have certain dream aspects with K9 saying he basically turns on Starkey, and Starkey wakes up, and he gets up, and then all of a sudden like something grabs him from the leg, and then he wakes up again completely freaked out. And then we also learn that the entire world, or at least an entire local area, has fallen asleep in a very deep sleep where a lot of people are having very real feeling dreams. Whether the people get actually hurt or any damage come upon them is unknown, but it seems like a majority of people are stuck in a dream-like state. And it wasn't for the fact that K9, who's a robot who cannot sleep, woke Starkey up by just being hilariously just irritating. He's basically an alarm clock at this point. That woke Starkey up, and Starkey wakes Griffith up, and each character basically wakes each other up. Now it's here that it is established that Darius has a fear of not only enclosed spaces, which has actually been referenced once before in Fear itself, but this story also establishes Darius's fear of clowns, and he explains his fear of clowns is like he was a kid. He wanted his father got him a birthday present of a clown for his birthday, but instead of him being overjoyed, he was absolutely terrified of this particular clown, and so he has a fear of clowns. Now, this is one of the big issues of the story. The story introduces these concepts and has great And despite these characters have had so little so far, you can establish a very deepen the emotional connections with these characters with the right scripts. I mean, from what we've learned of the characters, there is plenty to work off here. This isn't the first, second, or third episode in the series. We can talk about Starkey and the fact, he was homeless for a while and he's got a new family. You could tackle upon that. Darius's claustrophobia. You can tackle Georgia's fear of being controlled by her mother. You could talk about Griffith and his connection with his family. None of that plays into the part of the story. Not at all. In fact, the idea of introducing yet another fear for Darius and still not explore it is just very a missed opportunity and a very pretty dull experience. Also, outside of the dream, the story takes its very similar feel for the most part, with the second half having a very basic looking style. It seems like a lot of characters are shot straightforward, and you always have like these group shots where characters are like center or parallel to each framing, giving it a very simplistic feeling, which does kind of help with its uneasiness, especially that we learn that basically everybody's asleep, and it's because of this creature, this entity called the Bodax, which is part of mythology, if you didn't know. The Doctor Who and you take in mythology and into its canon has just been a recurring thing at this point, especially with Egyptian mythology. But anyway, and it turns out that the department had given Griffith a item, this red jewel-like thing, and in Darius's dream, he sees this monument, this like wooden monument, and it seems to have one eye and one missing, and the eye is actually the form of this crystal that Griffith has had, and they quickly established that this could be the cause of it, that there is some sort of psychic connection that's making this crystal, making everybody in the local area falling asleep. And to try and combat this, each of our characters has to wear a tinfoil hat, which means we get a lot of funny looking scenery, and the fact that the tinfoil hats makes this episode gives it a very silly charm to it. It's very corny, but I must admit, seeing all of our characters in tinfoil hats, and Darius kind of makes like a habit of his to try and impress Georgie. It's amusing in a way. But let's talk about the Bodax, because it does take on a physical form. And I must be honest, I did actually genuinely enjoy this costume design. It's got like this moth looking feel to it. And though it feels a lot like a costume, it looks, you can definitely feel the presence of a costume, and it kind of feels cheap in certain ways. That's actually rectified in the story, because one of the twists, this is actually kind of a big twist, it turns out that the Bojack doesn't actually have a physical form, and that the costume being worn is actually a costume, and the main host, the main target for the Bodaks to take on the physical form is actually Georgie's mother, and she becomes like the main threat, like the main dealing with the problem after the reservation is that oh my god, it's Georgina, how are we going to save her, how are we going to get this out of her and save the world from the Bojacks, as well as summoning an army of sleeper zombies, I guess, a bunch of people just like sleepwalking to be like their army. And I love how Darius also gets controlled. It's playing for, the story developed to be fun. But I feel like with this idea and these characters, you could have gone so much more. But let's talk about the dreams itself, because one of the great and one of the more interesting aspects of a dream story is just seeing the weird and strange environments that the dreams can pursue. Or, if you're not going to do that, you can play around, do the Nightmare on Elm Street method, where you can't really tell what's a dream and what's real yet. And though it does do that in one scene at the start, nothing like that ever happens again. And what I find really disappointing is that when we go back to the dreamscape, when we go back to the dream reality, it's the exact same setting for everyone. And the professor basically hypnotizes himself at one point to try and get to the dreamland so that he can, because he's got a tinfoil hat on, he's protecting his mind from the Bodaks. But he hypnotizes himself so he could go in this dreamland without interference from the Bodaks, and he could figure something out. Or somehow K9 also finds himself in the dreamland, which kind of goes against what, K9, a robot. And I don't know how the professor just doesn't realise, this could be part of the dream. It's very strange. But every time we go back into this dreamland, it's the exact same setting and it's the exact same environment. And K9 sees a sheep at one point. Georgina gets to actually kind of control her dream at one point when she tries to rescue her mother later on. But the professor, who clearly in the franchise has the most trauma and has the most character to have an emotionally gripping dream or nightmare with the loss of his family, and especially after the episode The Fall of House of the Griffith, they could have easily played with that, but it's never even mentioned. And nothing ever weird happens when he's in the dreamscape. Just absolute, apart from K9 goes wandering off, and the professor's just like, "Hey, K9, get over here. Down, bad boy, come here." And that's it. What a colossal disappointment. The best thing about this is that, Dreamscapes doesn't have to be realistic, so you can just go completely cheap and weird with it. I could probably direct a better dream sequence on this camera, on my phone, that I could talk to you. In probably under 5 minutes, with a lot of close-ups, long shots, medium shots, just different variety of shots, and put it in a way in a stylized format to make you understand it's a dream. But no, this story takes the most basic looking shot progression into account, and the episode, not that it feels bad, I feel like this story does actually have a lot going for it, especially just the pure enjoyment value of seeing zombie sleepwalker characters, and the characters are all, it's basically a zombie story by the second half, where you have all of these characters basically trying to keep the sleepers out, whilst also trying to keep themselves up, or in a zombie apocalypse sense, trying to keep themselves from not dying and becoming zombies themselves. So our characters are trying to work out and trying to keep themselves awake, with Darius falling asleep, and he lets the other people. Actually, I don't think he falls asleep. It's more like he gets extraordinarily tired that the Bodaks can actually take its mind. I also love the fact that the Bodaks doesn't really talk. It just sort of appears, and we never get like a true face of it. I guess you could say the monument, which does have a face sculptured into it, that could be the face of the Bodak. But I like the concept of the Bodak, and I like the survival nature of the second half of the story. However, when it comes to a story about it's called Dream Eaters, and the only thing dreams about it is the most basic and most dull part of the story, sadly. I mean, it's visually nice to see, you know, a different colour palette and a different strange looking colours, lighting, but apart from the fact that it's kind of set at night and it's seamlessly in a grassy environment, the story could, the dream sequence could have easily just been filmed anywhere, really. And it's just really, really just disappointing. So the Bodax gets the ornament and takes it to the physical monument, which seemingly is in the local area. I don't know if that plays into the part of them having the dreams. It doesn't really quite make much sense. And so they summon K9 to basically go to where the monument is, because he's a robot. He doesn't have to sleep, and he tries firing the crystal with very little effect. So Georgina puts herself to sleep on purpose so she can meet her mother in the dreamscape, and to try and wake her up, she basically makes her mother see her worst nightmare, in which she reveals on her arm she has a tattoo with a heart. I think it says Darius, or I can't remember if it says Starkey or Darius. I think it says Darius, which is very odd because it's been established that she kind of likes Starkey, so I don't know if that was a red herring or she just did that she just only pretends to like Darius to annoy her mother in that point of view. But it's very strange, and this seemingly puts the fear of God into Georgie's mother, to the point where she actually wakes up, takes the ornament, freeing everybody from their sleepless state, and she runs up to Griffiths' house, sees her daughter sleeping, and looks at her arm to reveal that there's nothing on her arm. And the professor's like, "Oh, your daughter saved the day. Let her sleep, let her rest." And everybody wakes up completely, seemingly unaware of the events that have taken place. So anyway, that is Dream Eater. Sorry this video is a bit short, but there's not really much to talk about. I think the story does have some things going for it. It has a great zombie-like feeling into it, and as I said, in the second half, the directing becomes really basic, which would be an issue in certain places. But the fact that this series has very little visual style, it kind of gives it a style of its own. But for a Dream episode, that's probably not a great excuse, as the story lacks a visual connection, and it also fails to really talk about our characters, which is something which Dream episodes are usually great at, if not to show us really weird visuals. And this story does neither, and it does beg the question, why even make it a Dream episode to begin with? Why revolve this story about dreams? It does beg that question, and somebody who really likes dream fiction, I'm really disappointed in to say that the episode is yet again another fail for the series. But anyway, that's Dream Eater. So join me next time, where we will have another group of characters tackling a dream-like entity, as the Sarah Jane Smith and her ragbag team from Bannerman Road also come up against a nightmare monster. So join me next time for the Nightmare Man, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!